Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm delighted to welcome you all here tonight at the Center of Visual Arts and Research, but even more delighted to have with us our very interesting speaker, Mrs. Serap Kanay. Our speaker will talk to us about the Afro Cypriots through the ages, a community in Cyprus that most of us know very little about, a community which suffered much on this island and yet insisted on calling it and feeling it their own homeland. Just a few words about Mrs. Kanay. Serap Kanay followed at London Guildhall University Foundation Studies in Art and Design, and then was awarded a BA in Fine Arts, as well as a Research Master in Cultural Analysis at the University of Amsterdam. She has had many solo and participated in group art exhibitions, parallel to lecturing widely in Cyprus and abroad and publishing many articles. Her main subject concerns research on the Afro Cypriots. Mrs. Kanay is a certified tourist guide. I could go on and on about her, but I'm sure we all want to hear her lecture. So please, Serap, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. İyi akşamlar, hoş geldiniz. Galisperasas. How do I say hoş geldiniz? Galisperasas, yes, I know that. Yes, as reader says, my name is Serap Kanay. I don't call myself Mrs. That's my mother. Mrs. Kanay is my mother, so I'm Ms. Kanay, okay, for future information. I have been researching on Afro Cypriots since 1996, and lately I used it as part of my research master, which was on alternative narrations, alternative history, alternative archiving with alternative narrations, which included oral history. So my look at Afro-Cypriotness stems from oral history. It stems from what people know of themselves, know of their origins, and how they perceive themselves, and how they think they are perceived within the sort of large community of Cyprus. So that's my starting point. I'd like you to kind of note that somewhere. But also, recently, thanks to lockdown, not the pandemic, but the lockdown itself, which I find very productive, I collaborated with an academic who's also herself Afro-Cypriot, and we actually wrote 2 articles that have been published, both of them. One is about the awareness and consciousness raising on Afro-Cypriotness and racism and colorism and prejudice, and the other one is about Afro hair. So those 2 articles have been published. The Afro hair was published online last year in October, and it's actually now in print in ERS, Ethnic and Racial Studies Journal of Ethnic and Racial Studies, and the other one's Intercultural Studies, and at the moment it's online because it went online in July this year. So those can be found. So I wanted to leave something, although I work with oral history, my aim is not only find out, to make aware myself and others around, including the Afro Cypriots themselves, and acknowledge our history, and accept ourselves as we are. So that's why we have this title here. But also to have some kind of recording of it as alternative history and as alternative archiving. Because as I'm an artist, I also work with this in my visual work too. I had an exhibition in 2005 as part of Leaps of Fate, which took place in both sides of Nicosia and in the buffer zone. And that was the first time in Cyprus that I showcased 240 photographs of Afro Cypriots, including my family, that was designed in a room that were suspended from the ceiling and was kind of just above your head, your face, and you wandered around, and it was a room bigger than this one. And I had 15 interviews that I did that was on tape at that time that were all mixed together and was used as the sound. So to indicate that you walked into a room full of Afro Cypriots. And it was called Connections Bizler. Bizler means us, but I like it to be known as Connections Bizler rather than us. But basically, it was to give the people the idea of how much we are here. Saying that we are here, yes, we are Cypriots, was what I did in 1999 in London. And that was the first time that this subject was shown as an artwork that following the loss of my grandfather, who was in Cyprus in February, and the loss of my uncle 40 days after that, who was in London, and having people at the funeral who were a lot of black people at a Bangladeshi mosque, which I thought were just ordinary Londoners that turned out to be Afro Cypriots that I didn't know about, who were not family. So I got permission from my cousins, one of them is here now, and basically talked to some people and started and did a storyboard of who we were. So that was a smaller one, mainly family and some of the people. Not everybody who was at the funeral wanted to participate, but that was basically the start of what I then called the Black Cypriot Project. Since then, I changed it to Afro Cypriot Project because along the way, with the other things that I started my interviews with that project first. Some of them were just sort of informal ones, 1999 and 2000, and then 2002, 2005, 2013, 2021, and even, the last ones were 2021 before we published the papers. So different stages. In 2011, we established the Afro Cypriot group on Facebook. So that's when we started calling it Afro Cypriots rather than Black Cypriots. But in 1996, 97, the first time I basically had to think about identifying myself on an official paper, which was at a hospital or a health center, that I had to tick a box of who I was. And all the categories that was there, I couldn't find myself. And the only option was to think other. And I didn't want to be the other, just other, and who are you, who is the other? So the woman that was there gave me time, said, just think what you want, and I will make sure that they get it, as a category. So we spent half an hour before I decided what I wanted that category to be. And that category was Turkish-speaking Black Cypriot. So that's how the whole thing kind of started from there. But then I thought, okay, did I just make this up? Or does other Cypriots that are similar to me feel and think the same? Is this a concept that exists? So that's with the death of my uncle and starting to talk to people in London, that's got the ball rolling. Then in 2000, I decided to move back to Cyprus after 17 years in London, partly because I want to talk to the elders here before they all passed away to get some information as to who we were and what. Because my granddad was 60 when I was born. So I thought that my granddad will be there forever. So it's like we came and we went and whatever. I kind of talked to him a little bit, but I never got to actually ask him about who he thought he was and how his life been, apart from what we saw his life. So when he died, then I was really devastated and thinking, who's going to kind of carry this essence, because I saw him as essence of our blackness, our family's essence of blackness. And then I realized when he died, and then followed by my uncle, that there wasn't really anybody in the next generation who would follow, because I don't know, some of you might have read that, I've said this before, but I had this image of living in a football ground, and you had your grandparents holding all the corners. I only had 3 grandparents to begin with. My mum didn't have a dad. So it was fine because my granddad was holding it on one side and the 2 grandparents was holding it on the other side, and it was fine. And then we lost my grandmother on my dad's side, and it was still okay because there were 2 on either side, on the corners. And then she died, and it was still okay. My granddad was holding the ground. But then when he died, the whole ground started shaking because there was no one holding it. So then I looked at my dad's generation. Some of my uncles were already dead as well. And then I thought, well, who's going to hold it? Nobody is going to. Then I thought, I have to hold it now. So that's also another reason why I wanted to kind of delve into this. So I might not go exactly with the slides, but just bear with me, okay? So basically, it's just a little bit about myself here. Okay, this is my main work, as Rita put it, both visually and in research. I collect a lot of photographs. I was taking a lot of photographs as I was talking to people as well, and also asking to borrow their photographs from their ancestors, their elders, to use. So that's some of the work, some of the photographs that I used in 2005. And I believe that an artist's life is her work. So whatever you do, the way you live is the way that your work comes out, basically. So I call myself a social commentator. I'm a tourist guide, certified, almost 20 years. I'm a researcher, always learner. Cultural analysis is what I did in research in Amsterdam, so that's why. And these lovely people. I have 2 young, lovely humans who basically put together this slide, because I'm not very good at putting slides together. So they were at the beginning. We call ourselves the new memories, because we talked about the past, and one of them is also has heritage, African heritage. So it's the collective. So that's the slide put together. So yeah, the next one I just said. So these are my mom and dad. So Black Cypriot Turkish speaking was the category that I identified. And my main resource, the way that I work, is oral history. And what I said about understanding how people see themselves. And I had a lot of interviews. At the time when I wrote, my first time was 2005, that I wrote something that I presented at the Eastern Mediterranean University. I had about 20 interviews, I think, but I probably have talked to about 100 people. So I do my interviews on tape, on audio. Some of them were on video, some written, and some just chatting, because people don't want to be recorded when you're talking to them. They feel better when you don't write anything or put it. In fact, when I did the interviews, some people said more things after I turned off the tools, okay. So my main aim was, as I said, to have this as recorded, because official history doesn't include us. And there's a saying that I quote from another person, that when I looked at the books, I couldn't see my grandmother. So I want us to be there. And I want the coming generations to know that we have been here for a while, a long while, in fact. So here, this is the earliest that I talk to people that they know of, is 1700s. But in fact, in Ronald Jennings's writings, it goes back to 1590s. That there's some records at the Epcot, and that's where it starts that he found some things. But my knowledge, anyway, it goes back to Roman times when there were some black people in Cyprus. So that's like pre-Christ, or just about when Christ was around. So what I found with the first interviews were most of the work was with domestic servants. They were field workers, and they were skilled independent Irelands. When I say that, I mean that they were nurses, they were healers, they were beauticians of today's. They were called gelinonare in those days. You used to have women used to have, that went round to village, getting the brides ready, because they didn't have the hairdressers, they didn't have the beauticians, they didn't have these in each village anyway. So this person would be equipped with everything that the modern beautician houses have these days. So they would do the hair, they would do the makeup, they will basically get them, because remember, the brides those days never had makeup before their wedding. So, this is what they did. So where did people come from? Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, along the Nile Valley is what I found initially. Since then, found out there's Tunisia, there's Senegal, which came out on my DNA thing, also Chad, so many other places, as well as basically what used to be the old Mesopotamia, okay? So it's still surprising that people can come up and say some other things. But most people's oral knowledge, that it goes back to Africa, obviously, and that is from Ethiopia, it's around the Nile, but some of them are related to the Ottoman period, that they say some of their ancestors worked for the Ottoman Empire as officials that were in Egypt and also in Sudan. So some of them said even that they were like pashas or viziers, which are equivalent to MPs and maybe prime minister or something of today. That kind of work. I had some people that also said that. People also said that their ancestors were taken away while playing as a child, and that they were brought here. One of them especially said that this girl was like the daughter of the head of the family, and they were doing up her hair next to the water, and some boats arrived and everybody else went away, but she had her eyes closed because she had things on her hair, on her face, and she wasn't able to escape, so she was taken away and then brought to the Ottoman Empire and then brought here as well. There were some men that worked as male home servants, which is now nowadays called like kahya, and also women that work both in the fields and also in the house. So from my research, I found some dates going to 1820s, 1830s, but one family who could basically deduct back because they had people that lived really long. One person lived 122 years. In fact, surpassed her daughter and had raised the grandchild who is still alive. She's 90 something. I talked to her in 2005 and she was 82. So, she's still alive. So her grandmother died at 122. So then looking back at her grandmother, we went back to 17 something. So, but all the other ones were around 1820s, 1830s, 1845 was another date that I found. So these dates indicate the British rule on the island, but most of the slaves and the free blacks came here during the Ottoman period, basically. It's just said what I just said, I think. Yes. Yeah, and this is what I said about Ronald Jennings, that he found stuff that was kept in Ethnography Museum in Nicosia that is from 1590. But there were also people that were brought here to work at sugar cane plantations. We had sugar cane plantations around Episcopi, yeah? And a lot of people were brought here, both black and white, to work at these plantations. And this goes back to the Lusinian period in Cyprus, which is from 1192 until 1489. Because you heard of Katerina Cornaria, the last monarch of Cyprus. Katerina Cornaria's uncles made some deal with the Lusinians beforehand, and in fact bought some land around Episcopi. And then they started doing the sugarcane business. Cyprus at one point was actually exporting sugar to the rest of the world. So this is one of the reasons why there were a lot of black people that came from Episcopi all around there. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of people, when I was growing up, was asking me if we come from Episcopi, because they thought that was the only place where there were black people. And they said, no, we didn't. And the next place was Sinde, in Eni today, in the Messiah. They said, no, we're not from there either. So I was born in Famagusta. My dad comes from Lefke, but actually comes from the outskirts of Rhodes Mountains, but grew up in Lefke. Mom comes from a little Messiah village, but they got married in Famagusta, so we were born in Famagusta. So there were less black people in Famagusta, except for those ones who came to work at the harbour, because the harbour was a very busy place and provided work for people. Okay. This is something from the exhibition that I had in 2005, and no, you don't see the same thing. Okay. The woman you see in the very front is a great aunt, and the ones behind that one is kind of a great aunt, like a yenge and her children. And the one behind there with the head, the black headscarf thing, is my paternal great grandmother. So that's my granddad's mother. And then there's more family behind that. So, as I said, oh yeah, I forgot to mention there were also musicians when they came. So later on, when the British wanted to put the Turks and the Greeks against each other, they created the police force, and then there was the police force that basically a lot of black people joined the police force on both sides. So that was like a step up from coming from families that worked the fields or worked the mines in Lefke, like my granddad did. And a lot of people worked at the mines at the time. And they also became teachers and certified nurses afterwards. When I was looking into researching, I was looking at the names also, and not having surnames prior to 1977 in the north, it was actually easier to find people, because usually people name their male child after their father, and then they name the other child after that father. So, you have Ali Hussein, Hussein Ali, Ali Hussein, Hussein Ali, and you could follow how it went. And similar, not as common, but most of the time, we also had the maternal grandparents, grandmother's name for the girls as well. So, for example, we have Fatima, nowadays Fatma, Sherif Ali. So this is again the great grandmother. And Said and Merjan were the two main names that I come across with other people as well. Merjan, sometimes written as Merjan with a C, here it's written with a J, is the color of the, what is it? It's like dark red, it's like ruby red kind of merjan, and that's the color basically. It's a coral. It's the color of the corals from pink to kind of dark red. And the story behind this name is that when the men were employed in the households as the household servants, they have to wear a sash around their waist. And this sash was this color, basically. So if people were taken, or they had some African name from where they came from originally, they didn't have names. So the house owners started calling them Merjan. So when freed, quite a lot of these people chose to keep this as a name. And there are even families that are called Merjanlar, like in plural, Merjan, yeah? And the Said is the same. Said is written with a D or with a T, later with a T, originally with a D, indicates that they might have come from a Muslim background because it's an Arabic name, yeah? So with this, we managed to find quite a few Merjanlar, even...
Sorry, it's just making a bit of noise.
Okay.
It's a bit too late.
That's like in my eye now.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So one of my interviewees in 2000 in London, when I asked her what did she think, where we came from, where her ancestors came from, she said there were three brothers and they were brought here and they went, one of them went to Lefke, one of them went to Paphos, one of them stayed in Messaria, and then they just dispersed basically and then got married and everybody's surname is Marjan, or these are our ancestors for all the black people that are in Cyprus, was her theory. But, maybe not exactly like that, but a lot of the families do have at least one Marjan in their family. So that's another point. Here is my family tree. This is from another exhibition which took place in South Nicosia at the NIMAC, which was the second version or second episode of the Connections. This time it was called Connections Father, Connections Mother. So this is the Connections father. And this time I had the photographs with the names. In the first one, I didn't have any names, any information at all in the 2005. I just had the 240 photographs. With this one, I had one side the names and the dates you see here, and then on the other side I had the photographs. So I gave some information about the people. So then these are basically the timeline of the family tree, yeah? So this is still the paternal side. Of course, we added to them now. We have more children. I have grandsons, but this was until the 2017. No, 2007 was this exhibition. This is my granddad and grandmother. This is also from the exhibition in 2005. We have this man to the side. He died at 105. He is also family from my dad's side. And that's the great-grandmother again. This is a great-uncle, his wife, and their granddaughter. This is my dad, my granddad in the middle, my uncles, my aunt, my mother, my two aunts in fact, and myself, my brother, and my sister in front. In Paphos, and a tiny cousin helped with one of my aunts there. This is in Paphos in 72 or 73, probably 72. This is again from the exhibition. These are from my mother's side. That's another thing. When I grew up, I always thought that my father was the side that had the blackness in the family. But when I started researching, I found out that my mother also had a line of blackness in her family, which she finds hard to accept still. But so we looked into that. So she has like my grandmother's granddad, basically, was a black man in Messiah. So these are some of their cousins. And these people in the front is the brother of my granddad, his family, his children. So my granddad died at 97. This guy died 1 year later at 98. And their sister died in 2005 at 99, a month before she was going to be 100. So they do live long. We have my dad now, who is 85, and one of my aunts, the other one passed away. My aunt is 77, and my dad's 85. Those are two surviving ones now. So again, these are from the exhibition, and the people behind are, he's the great uncle, so my grandmother's uncle on my dad's side, and his daughter and his wife. And here we have the timeline on my mother's side, black people in it. With the dates, this is also from the exhibition in 2007 at the Lima. My mother's aunts, my cousins, my cousin, and myself. Okay? So this is all from 2005. What else did we find? I would ask people, what do they think? Like names, normal interview. What's your name? Where are you from? When was your birthday? Who's your mom? Who's your dad? Then I'll ask, who's black in the family? Then, what job are you doing? What job did they do? Where did you come from? Is it like where they live now or somewhere else? And then later on, I'll come and say, so did you notice any kind of differential treatment while we were growing up? Did you notice any kind of differential treatment at school, when you're working? Now, most people will say no first. No, me never. This would be the sort of first token answer. But then when you kind of ask more, sometimes they say, turn that thing off and I'll tell you. Or we turn it off anyway and then they start saying about something. And I said, well, that is that. Or they say something that contradicts themselves a minute later. They give an example of an incident. And I say, well, that is prejudice and that is kind of racism. But my own experience, and this is part of the paper that we wrote as well, is colorism and hairism, I should call it, I suppose. It's about Afro hair. I say in Turkish, bu saçımdan neler çektim, or neler çekmedim bu saçlarımdan. It's like, what haven't I suffered because of my hair? It's that kind of thing, because you get talked about, you have name calling, many, many words about your hair, which still carries on. Today we were at the market, somebody just said, look at that hair. They just kind of carry on, and also because of the color, they just assume now especially that there are more Africans in Cyprus, that you're not a Cypriot. You can't be a Cypriot. So in the market, they talk to me in English when they call me to go and buy something instead of talking in Turkish, and they get surprised. Then this is the experience of quite a few of my interviews in London. People don't expect them to speak Turkish when they go to a shop or to a restaurant, especially to a Turkish shop or a Turkish restaurant. You talk to them in Turkish and they don't acknowledge you. They don't get it because they don't expect this look to have this language. So then, although you say something in Turkish, they say, this person doesn't speak English, they said to me one time. When I actually said something in Turkish, they said, this person doesn't speak English. I said, I said that in Turkish. But they don't get it. Or I'm trying to order something and they don't understand what I want because they don't expect me to say. And this actually happened a lot, that I got this answer from a lot of the interviews in London. And one of them said, they're shocked. This is the kind of thing. And also, black people don't expect you to speak Turkish in London. So, they think you look Afro-Caribbean, you look African, whatever. And Cyprus, where is that? People don't know where Cyprus is. And if you say you're Cypriot, they say, oh, so you speak Greek. Or they start saying Yasu or something, And I said, no, speaking Turkish. How come this and that, all this. And this is one of the reasons why I actually said Turkish-speaking Cypriot, because I used to say Cypriot when I first went to London. And then everybody assumes I speak Greek, and then I don't speak Greek. So then I didn't want to say Turkish Cypriot because I didn't want that separation, basically. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to kind of go into it, then I have to then add my blackness because, that's... First, I thought that's in the forefront with the communities that I was working with and the people that I mixed with in London. So my blackness I didn't have to mention. But when it came to identifying yourself with all the bits that you are, that, that it should be acknowledged that you're black, it should be acknowledged that you come from Cyprus and that you speak Turkish, then that's why I came up with that. When I started first writing, I started saying African heritage Cypriot. But somehow the internet writing doesn't accept heritage. It wants to say heritage, not the D. So I started basically, I still say that, and I say that in Turkish as well when I write, but as a generic thing, we're using Afro Cypriots, because also that in 2011, I was on a television program that was broadcast both in London and in Cyprus. And following that, we had a lot of people responding and wanting to be included, wanting to know more, wanting to tell us about themselves, which is what happened in 2005 as well, which was like my aim, that people will be okay about coming out and saying, we're here as well. And I had people saying, you left us out. And I say, okay, I didn't know about you, so it's good that you're coming forward now. I had a lot of people like that, and that kind of provided me with more interviews. I still got loads of people to interview. I have about 50 interviews now that's been transcribed, that is ready to kind of be published, but I have more people I like to talk about, and my book's been delayed because I keep on wanting to talk to more people. But I think I need to just stop at one point, get the book going, and then carry on talking to people afterwards. I also wanted to speak to some Greek Cypriots, Greek-speaking Cypriots who are black. And I kind of found some, they're more reluctant to talk, but I found some that were willing to talk just before the pandemic locked us up. So we kind of fallen through now. But I don't know if we can kind of pick that back up. But any of you here who has this heritage or who knows everyone with this heritage, please come forward. I like people to come and talk to me, and I like to interview at least 10 people to put in my book, because I don't want to say North Cyprus, I don't want to say Turkish Cyprus, I want to say Afro Cypriots, which includes all of us. So please do that, okay? So what was I saying? So yes, wanted people to come forward, and they started coming forward. So we have some more slides, so I'm just gonna show you. These are kind of family album, okay, from my side. This is some of the cousins that came from London and some others that live in Cyprus that sort of gathered together at my paternal grandparents' house, and then my maternal grandmother, my aunts, more cousins, my daughter and my niece with my father at her wedding. And these are some friends. This is Redif's family. You might have heard of Melis Redif. She's an international athlete, very successful. She competed in the Olympics in London in 2012. So she's one of my famous Black Cypriots. And this is her mother, who still thinks that I'm darker than her, and she doesn't count herself as black, even today. She thinks her husband is black, and that's why the children are black, although her sister is like as black as this computer. So, like, you know. But this is how we have some people as well. And this is the grandmother from the dad's side. And then you have a tiny bit picture of the dad in the middle there. And these are some people that I interviewed. This is the people that I was talking to who still lives, that I interviewed at 80, when she was 82 in 2005. This is the grandmother that died at 122, the one with the veil. That's other two people from Chatos, sister and brother. This man's interesting. He said to me, like, no racism. His wife looks much whiter, but apparently his wife's grandfather was also black. But because she looks white, she was scorned for marrying this man who was very dark in skin. He was saying, like, no, there was no racism. No, there was no prejudice. And then she said, don't you remember? You know, everyone kind of told me off for marrying you, and everyone made these comments, so he wouldn't deny that this is what happened. But she said, like, you know, my mom and dad, my parents asked me to marry this man. I married him. We get on along. What is it to anybody else? Why do they want anything? You know, we're humans, and that's fine. And what he said was, because we got a lot of name calling. Yeah, this is part of colorism. So the name calling, one of them is Arab. You've probably heard this. But Arab with a B instead of with a P. Arab with a P is like Arab. But Arabs are Arabs, like from Arabic countries. Okay. So what my answer is that we're not Arabic. We're from here. We're Cypriots. That's what they call the men usually. And he said, I don't mind, or I can tolerate if they say my name first and Arab afterwards. I will not accept it if they say Arab this. So he wouldn't be Arab Yannis or Arab Ali. He wants to be Ali Arab, because he said, I am this first, this person, my name, then Arab afterwards, if that's how they want to put it. I get really annoyed when I hear, or I'm even shocked that I never heard it growing up, that anyone called my dad that. But I heard it recently that somebody referred to my dad like that, and I'm like in complete shock still. But they call my brother like that. I heard that before, but they still don't understand, despite everything that I say, that this is not really acceptable. But people still use it. But we have a very famous Arab Ali song, basically, you know, the Arab Ali incident. So there are people that are called Arab first and then their name afterwards. But this is generally people like it or don't like it. But if it has to be there, it has to be on the other side. Kara is another word which means black in Turkish. Kara in Turkish, but Kara in Cypriot Turkish, that they say Kara Ali, Kara Mehmet, like my paternal great-great-granddad is Kara Mehmet. So they get known with that. Uzun is another one. It means tall. So because the people first that came, this is another way that we think people might have come from Eritrea, is that they were quite tall. So they're dark and they're tall. So those are, and then Zenci is a word that mostly Turkish people use rather than Cypriots, Turkish speaking Cypriots. And Habesh, which is not really used that much, but it was used in the past. But what they call the woman is halayk, which is a very offensive word in my dictionary. Sorry, that's my alarm for my eye drops, which I don't have with me. Just press stop there. Thank you. No? Yeah. Sorry. Hoping not to go blind in one night or missing. Oh, never mind. So, halayik means a female servant. Because of her dark skin, was actually put to work harder in the fields rather than the ones that worked in the house. Sorry, we'll talk from here. But also were the ones that would be raped, used as a concubine. So people think that this is an endearing thing to say, halayk. It's not. Please do not use it. It's very offensive, and it's one of the words that basically shows colorism again, because in mixed families, we should say, because there were a time when I'm told by my interviewees that black people were only allowed to marry other black people because white women or white men wouldn't go for the other side of the families, wouldn't allow them. On some of them, I come across one really dark woman on my mother's side, like a distant person who was very dark herself. She has kind of a light-looking son, and they were suggesting so-and-so to go and see so-and-so's daughter that you might like for marriage. And when they turned up at this house, apparently this was a black household, and the woman got really offended, saying, just because we're black, you think we only want to marry black people, why did you send us here? And she got like really upset. The son married in Sweden, and he lives in Sweden, so he married a very white woman at the end. But one of the other things, and I think it's part of the colorism, is that, like my aunt used to always say, is open the color or open the paint or lighten the color, basically. So she married all her children with blonde people. So their grandchildren are, much, much lighter. And this is because the darker your skin, the more you suffer. The more name calling you get, the more likely your hair will be like mine, and then that's not so acceptable because then it's called a scarring card, and it's okay when you can take it, but there are times that you won't be able to take it as well. So, and you worry about, in the case of another interview that I had in last year, in fact, that her mother apparently prayed all through her pregnancy that her daughter's hair won't turn out like hers because of the way that she suffered because of her hair. And her grandmother, although she was black, she didn't like black people, she said. She actually said, my grandmother is racist because she doesn't like black people. And then I said, what about your husband? He was a very black man. And said, but he was handsome. So it's okay, but all the other black people are not okay, kind of thing. And she always said that she said a word about, tidy up your hair, tidy up your hair. And then when she straightened her hair with chemicals and things, which at the end ruined her hair, she would say, that's nice, this is the way you should stay, kind of thing. And then she said, it wasn't until all of a sudden my hair was on my lap that I stopped treating my hair and accepted that I have Afro hair. And now, she said, I used to pull it down all the time. I go up like this push it up all the time now, she said. So this is about the sort of raising black consciousness. And this comes more from people who's been up road, more, that came, that managed to go outside England, outside Cyprus. This girl, in fact, had this kind of culture shock that she was here until 12 and then they went to live in England. And then she's now back in Cyprus. But she was saying when she went there as well, she didn't know because she kind of identified with the sort of Afro-Caribbean kids, but then she didn't have the language. So until she kind of, navigated her way and learned enough English. And then she said, I like their music, I like the way how they were relaxed because our house was really strict. And then there was a point when she started talking with the Afro-Caribbean kids and the Turkish kids around her said, you have to choose your side. Are you a Negro or are you a Turkish person? And then she said, I looked at my skin and I decided I must be a Negro. So then the whole group sided with her, so they stopped talking to me. But then I was okay about it, she said. But, it's this kind of thing that you also get. So that was another example. Let's just move on here. Yeah. These are from Limassol. So, yeah. So going back to the sugarcane, one of the reasons about Episcopi, but also Limassol, and some of the Limassol villages having a lot of black people around, is this sugarcane, and also the ships coming to Limassol harbour. So some people didn't go to work maybe, and they stayed around Limassol itself. And there's in fact one street that was called Arab Street near the harbour, there were quite a lot of blacks that settled there. Hirsofu or Christoforu, I think is how it's said in Greek, is another place where they had some black people there. And this is given as the reason because there were gold mines there apparently. And this is given as the reason that the people who were at the sugar plantations who did not behave were sent for harder work to the gold mines. And they had to basically walk there and work in harder places, and this is how there was a small community of Black Cypriots at Hirsofu. Now, with displacement and basically more movement about places, that people live in all sorts of different places. But these are the people that were in Limassol, the owner of the hammam in Limassol here. This woman, some people might know, Havva, she was called. She was sitting outside always at the back of the law courts in Nicosia in the north at Police Street. She came from Limassol. She had her stuff but never actually lived inside her house. She always sat outside. She didn't really want an interview. I went several times to talk to her. She would just say a few things but wouldn't want me to record her at all. And this is one of their family that became a certified. So they come from a healer's family, and she was the first certified sister educated in England. You might have heard of Debbie Syme, the director. So this is Debbie Syme's aunt. Yeah, she's Debbie Syme's aunt, basically. One of the oldest photos I have, this is from 1900. This is from Madili. Oops. What did I do? Okay, that's the other. Okay, yeah. So this man is their grandson. He's from Madili. And this is another one of my interviews, which told me an interesting story that they named the children. She comes from a crowded family. I can't remember if there's 6 or 7. They're all daughters, and she's the darkest one. And they call them daylight, midnight, the dark of the night. They basically gave them these nicknames. So she was like the midnight because she's like the darkest one. So she was saying that she had differential treatment from her grandparents who liked the lighter looking ones. One of them looked almost blonde, she said. she only has one parent who was black, and that she was only favorite with the dad's family and not with the mom's family because she was darker in the family. And then when she married a very handsome blue-eyed white man. And one of her children is black hair, and then the other one's blonde. And the son is darker with sort of curly hair. And the grandmother from the dad's side behaved in the same way that she was treated to the children. So when the daughter was born and she was light, and the grandmother came and picked her up and was really happy that this child was kind of light and everything. And the boy, apparently still little at the time, went and put his head on the knee, wanting to be loud as well. And she just pushed him, she said. She said, I never forget in the hospital, she just pushed him. And she said, I told her that he also wants to be loved and, have some attention. And she said, oh, it doesn't matter, he's a boy anyway, apparently was the answer. So that's the kind of treatment, and then that carried on. And how the people don't believe that, how come this blonde, handsome man with blue eyes will marry this dark black woman? So these are all part of colorism, prejudice, and racism at the end. Right, I think we came to the end of this slideshow. I'll close it from here. No? Is there any questions? I'm going to carry on, but I just need to.
I have one question. Do you think there are more Afro Cypriots in north part of the island or south part of the island?
Okay, good question. Thank you. There are more Cypriots the question was, are there more Cypriots in north part of the island or south part of the island? There are more Cypriots that speak Turkish and became Muslim, let's say. That's one of the things that I found. And the second thing that I found is that the Afro Cypriots in the south have more recent history than the ones in the north. Like, I'm sixth generation that I could find, like that Selim was my great whatever. But the people, like when I had the first storyboard in London in 1999, I wrote a piece, and in the piece I said, to my knowledge, most of the Afro Cypriots speak Turkish. And this woman came up who was working at the center to say that actually no, because my father is a Cypriot and he's Greek speaking. So I said, okay, I'm looking for people who speak. This is, I said, to the best of my knowledge. And I said, so what's the history? So she said, her granddad went to work like an officer in one of the African countries and married an African woman and then brought her to Cyprus. So she was only like second generation, basically. So there are more stories like that because of the work that some of the, office workers kind of thing that went abroad to. So it's shorter. But seemingly, let's say, there are more in the north than in the south. Thank you. Any other one?
Related to the previous question, do you know if there's a reason for that, or if you don't know why that's the case?
I'll just explain. But anyway, yeah, one of the reasons is that it's more recent because they went in the beginning.
Yes.
Okay.
Why that's?
Because they came during the Ottoman period. Okay, and if they didn't have any kind of religion at the time. Some of them were distributed, basically. Some of them were given to this family, and some of them. And there are actually, like this David Sam's family, they have two people who grown up Christians and two that grown up Muslims. It depended on where they placed you. But then at some point where they had to go to school, they were sent to a Turkish-speaking school, and then more people became Muslims, and then therefore Turkish. Sorry. I can't hear you.
Yeah. So you said that you showed pictures of, I think, what your family.
Yes, most of them are my
in
family.
battles, you said.
At some point, there were battles as well.
So my question is regarding this these two previous questions, were they also speaking Turkish?
Yes.
These communities in Papua and Limassol.
Yes. Yes, they were. But there are Greek-speaking ones in Limassol as well.
But also from the Ottoman times?
Well, I'm not so sure, but when I was doing in 2005, I had another exhibition. Wow. What happened? I had another exhibition in Nimak as well, because I was asked by Yanis Tomasis at the time when I was getting ready for the exhibition in the at Ipsos Fate. And when we were getting ready, I had some photographs and they actually came to my house and did an interview with me, and that's what was showed at the exhibition at the end, talking about my work. There was a man, sorry, is that, because it's related, that's why it got with me. So he said apparently that he wandered around Limassol and these black people speaking Greek. And this is some writer that Yanis knew. So he said, he wondered when he heard that I'm doing this research, do I know about these people who wander around Limassol, like this is in 2005, who are speaking Greek. So there are some in Limassol now. In fact, two of the people that I found who were supposed to going to talk to me, one of them who wasn't going to talk to me, and two that were going to talk to me are inside. There was a famous footballer, something Mavrodis. If you hear the name Mavro or Mavrodis, they have African heritage. Like we have Black or Kara, if you have Mavro or Mavrodis, they have African heritage. And this guy was somebody Mavrodis, and he played for Apoel. He was quite famous. Now I think he might still be the coach, even, or Apoel. There was somebody else.
Do you feel like there's maybe a difference in perception and acceptance of Afro Cypriot identity based on the different speaking communities? So, have the Cypriot speaking, Greek speaking communities?
Okay. Do I think that there's a difference between the Turkish speakers and the Greek speakers?
As in the acceptance of their identity?
Yeah, in the acceptance of our identity. That's also a good question, and I don't know because I haven't managed to talk to many Greek-speaking Black Cypriots, but one of the points that we make in the paper that we wrote is that because of the sort of never-ending lifelong Cypriot problem, which basically divides us on the basis of ethnicity, Black Cypriotness is gone underground, and we haven't had the time or the energy. That was another thing when I asked people about racism, if there was any differential treatment or how they felt, they would say no, there are Greeks and Turks. So, having this identity and being a minority or seemingly minority, I think people had to side with that, what was going on with the conjuncture that was in the hand. So it made us more invisible, if you like. So I call us the most visible invisible community because here we are in your face, but then I have lots of people, especially when I did the work in 2005, they say, "Oh, why did you do this? We don't see you any different than us." It's like, hello, talk about my experience, ask me about my experience. How do you not see me? And I said, saying that very sentence is prejudicial, it's discriminatory, that you need to see me different because I am different and you should at least imagine that I might be getting a different kind of treatment, So that's where kind of it starts. So, but with the Turkish and Greek kind of ethnicity problem all the time that we've been having forever, that goes more underground and it made it difficult for us to kind of own up to them being Black Cypriot. In fact, one of my interviews said that to me as well in 2000, saying that, we felt like we were a minority and then how could you then divide the minority even more, saying that here we are. So the difference is that in Turkey, for example, there are Afro-Turks and they know themselves as Afro-Turks and they know where they come from and they celebrate some kind of they celebrate a rocks festival or something. So they come together and they try to kind of keep some of the food and some of their tradition because we don't know exactly where we came from. We don't have the exact documentation, we don't have, although I told you most people done similar jobs because of where they came from, that's my kind of correlation. But because we don't have that kind of community roots in that sense, it's more difficult for people. But this is what I'm hoping with the work I do, that, like I said, when people come, more and more people come forward and identify as Black Cypriot, they acknowledge that part of their identity. I think it's important to make everyone's life better. Thank you for asking that. One more?
I grew up in a mixed village of Marmonites. And I grew up with this thing that we come from a mixed family. Turkish Cypriot, our own family was mixed, Turkish Cypriot and Marmonites. So this was part of my identity until recently, when a cousin told me that he actually asked my grandmother, who died a few years ago, maybe 100 years old, and she told him that he wasn't actually Turkish Cypriot. But this man came from Africa, from Egypt, from Augusta, and then he came to work in the village, and then he got married to a woman like that, and that's the line.
Yes.
So we are always people from Maya Marina, Maronites and Turkish Cypriots who believe that we have a son that became from a Turkish Cypriot Maronite.
Yes.
He was actually African. And then I had a neighbor from Egypt, and everybody who come, the relatives, my aunt used to visit me, was saying, she looked so much like him, and she looked so, and she looked, we had similar faces, and then I discovered that, wow,
yes. Well, what I said, I mean, this is interesting. I was in Ankara last week, and I stayed in a friend's house, and the daughter asked me, "Are you Turkish?" Then I'm trying to explain, but they said, "But are you Turkish?" So it's really difficult. Then I say, I'm black and I have African heritage. And he says, well, then you're not Turkish. And I'm saying, like, I'm sixth generation of Africans that came from somewhere in Africa. So, am I Turkish? That's why, the identification. And there are lots of mixed marriages, and there are also people who have, relatives on the other side, and some people I know who have. But now, when I did my DNA thing, I had a lot of distant relatives that came out with a Greek Cypriot name, basically, as well. So there are families who know of some people who either left at some point and went to the other side or to one side, or who actually married or whose grandmother changed. They changed their religion, and they more so with the Greek Cypriot woman becoming Turkish Cypriot rather than the other way around. I know of a person in Famagusta that she changed her name, she changed her religion, but when she died, they discovered that they were never married because he didn't make her change her religion really, although she changed her name and everything. So there was an issue where she would be buried, that she couldn't be buried in the cemetery, with the Muslim cemetery, because he didn't want her to kind of, be forced to be like that. And children didn't know about it until when she died, and then they kind of found the papers about that. So there are a lot of mixed people, and Maronites. I mean, what I said in the very beginning, Cyprus is more or less everybody's heritage is mixed in Cyprus. Really, we're not pure. We're not pure at all. I have some more photographs if I can open this one. Okay. So this is something that was collated when I had a talk in 2018 in November. Almost the same time. It was the 5th of November 2018. There is a Black History Month that is celebrated in London, and as the Turkish community, we're always late to do something in October, so we always had our things in November. So I thought this is a bit like that one as well, celebrating Black History Month in November in Cyprus. But here is Florenza, who put this together for my talk there. So here we have some names. It's a shame we don't have dates, but you can more or less guess. But basically to show the variety and the versatility of Black Cypriots in different places. Okay. Some of these are quite old, some of them are a bit recent. But barbers, workers, wedding photos, you know, they were very popular at one point. People saying a lot of things. This is about one of the earlier photographs that explain Turkish or depicted Turkish photography, Turkish Cypriot photography. This is very late, in 1929. This one got a date. Just move that. As I said, a lot of people worked either in the police force or actually as auxiliary police at the bases as well. And that was also a sort of kind of a class move, you know, becoming upper working class than, you know, field workers and peasants, teacher, musicians. Since starting, and recently I met a historian that does kind of later Ottoman history, and he came across some things about slavery in Cyprus, and in fact he wrote two articles, 2014 and 2018. One is about freed blacks, and the other one is about a murder between two black slaves that were slaves to the Russian consulate that was in Larnaca at the time. So he's looking into court records, he's on one time. Looking into court records basically, but also looking into the jobs that people might have done once they were freed. And one of them was, this is uncle and aunt, who became a merchant and became quite wealthy. My grandmother and the uncle, my brother and my father. Okay, I think that's the end. Okay? Thanks a lot.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Have you noticed any subtle differences in everyday culture, like, for example, food? Like, is there anything that's colored by color? I mean, by
Colored by color.
Yeah.
Not really.
There's no remains of the past or of the.
No, like I said, there's most of that in Turkey with the Afro Turks, but not really in Cyprus. There was one of the stories that I was told that there was one of the great aunts that she used to say something that wasn't nor Turkish nor Greek, and she used to make an ointment. So she was a healer, and she used to say one word that they thought that was coming, and this ointment was her speciality. That was basically good for broken bones and aches and pains and stuff, but it's not really kind of come along afterwards. It's not followed on from there. The names are the only thing that I can say that I followed. You know, Selim, Hatice, these are, and some of these are names from the Quran. So when the people were first introduced to Islam, they gave them like these names. So that's the only thing that follows really, not too. Can I take?
I'd like to thank Serap. You will have your question answered. I just want to say that you'll have her all to yourselves in a while when we go outside and have a drink of wine, because I can see that she's getting very, very tired.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
So outside we have wine, and you can have set up to yourselves and talk and chat and question her as much as you like.
But there were
Okay.
two hands. I will
All
take
right.
those, and then everyone can hear the answer. Then go.
As far as like antiquity in Cyprus,
Mm-hmm.
there's like evidence going right back, maybe even 6,000 years before Christ, of like iconography,
Yes. Yes.
images of like Comitian Empire here.
Yes.
So, have like as far as like African people in Cyprus go, you can trace it all the way back to possibly even 11,000
Yes, there
years
are.
before
There
Christ.
are.
Have you looked into that?
Yes, there are
Because
some.
the pharaohs were here. You know?
Yes, they were. Yes, there are. And Phoenicians were black people.
Yeah,
So,
Phoenicians.
yes, there are. Now they've all been here, and there are some pottery and pots and stuff
Like genetically,
that depicts them.
people in Cyprus genetically, when they do these
Yes.
tests, find out that they have links to.
Yeah, that's why it's
that.
surprising when something all of a sudden comes up in your DNA that you never thought of,
Yeah,
because of that. In fact, one of the things that I found was in a book that was in the British Library that had a black princess with a white servant that looked just like me. Somebody brought it to my attention. That is my picture from antiquity. It was like exactly like me. So this is another thing that I thought was like really long time ago, and it was found. In Turkey, like down at the bottom, when they were doing one of the excavations there, and they found these kind of things. So yes, I mean that's why I said it goes at least that I know of is Roman times, but even much further. Like I said,
that date, 1500. Does that?
the 1500 BC or
Yeah, you said it was 15.
no, the 1489 is when the Venetians came. 1192 is when the Lusitanians had started here. That's when I said the guy bought the land near Episcopi for the sugar plantation. That's much more recent. But there was one more person.
You mentioned a few families, Turkish speaking Afro Cypriots living in London, and I was wondering if there's a small community there, and if there was a particular reason the move was made like from Cyprus is a different treatment or some other reason.
Okay, good question. Yes, there are quite a few people. One of my interviews, I was reading about him yesterday. He said that because there were no jobs for them here, so they had to emigrate to London to get more jobs, and there were more racism here. And my friend David, who just said, he laughed thinking that, did they think there was no racism in England than in London? But it's the kind of prejudice that people faced here and didn't know what was going on in London anyway. But some people given that as a reason for moving, but I think most of it is like economic, like every other Cypriots, and also the troubles between the two sides, and the British Empire and what they've done to us. But yeah, but I've been told that I actually read it yesterday. That I thought that was one of the reasons why people left, black people left from here. But yeah, they're not that small. There's quite a bit of Afro Cypriots in London, in fact. They're not that little. There is a big Cypriot community in London altogether, more than us that are here. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Before you go, I'd just like to say that the next event at CVAR will be on the 16th of November, and it will be a photographic exhibition by Daisy Soyer on portraits of Cypriots. The 16th of November at 6 o'clock. Thank you. Outside for some wine.